Welcome back to Her True Stories, where real women share their most powerful moments of transformation. I'm your host, and today's story comes from Hilary Bell, a 59-year-old woman whose quiet strength became her greatest weapon against those who tried to break her. If you've ever felt invisible, undervalued, or betrayed by those closest to you, Hilary's journey will remind you that sometimes the most devastating revenge is simply revealing the truth. So settle in, because this story will take you on a journey from humiliation to triumph that you'll never forget. My name is Hilary Bell, and at 59, I thought I knew what rock bottom felt like. I was wrong. The Bentley pulled up to my son Marcus's estate on December 23rd, 2023, and I smoothed my best dress, a navy blue piece I'd found at TJ Maxx, and altered myself. Through the massive windows, I could see the glittering Christmas party in full swing. Crystal chandeliers cast rainbow reflections on marble floors, and elegantly dressed guests moved through rooms that cost more than most people's homes. I took a deep breath and walked to the front door, my heels clicking on Italian stone. The housekeeper, Maria, opened the door with a warm smile. "Mrs. Bell, so lovely to see you," she whispered, glancing around nervously. "You look beautiful tonight." I squeezed her hand. Maria was one of the few people in this house who still treated me like a human being instead of an inconvenience. The great room buzzed with a conversation of business titans, socialites, and politicians. Everyone who was anyone in Dallas was here, champagne glasses in hand, admiring the 30-foot Christmas tree that probably cost more than I made in 3 months. I spotted Marcus across the room, tall and commanding in his custom tuxedo, his arm around his wife Sophia. Even from a distance, she radiated that particular brand of artificial perfection that money could buy: porcelain veneers, surgical enhancement, and designer everything. Her laugh tinkled like wind chimes as she charmed a group of oil executives. I made my way through the crowd, accepting polite nods and brief acknowledgments. These people knew who I was, Marcus Bell's mother, but I was also just part of the background decoration, expected to smile, stay quiet, and be grateful for the invitation. "Mom," Marcus's voice boomed across the room as he spotted me. "There she is, everyone. My beautiful mother." Heads turned, and conversations paused. This wasn't unusual. Marcus loved grand gestures, especially when they made him look good. But something in his tone made my stomach clench. He approached with that megawatt smile that had charmed investors into parting with millions, pulling me into a bear hug that felt more like a performance than affection. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, his voice carrying easily over the suddenly quiet room. "I want you all to meet the woman who taught me everything about hard work and determination. My mother, Hilary Bell." Polite applause rippled through the crowd. I smiled and nodded, feeling heat creep up my neck. I'd never been comfortable being the center of attention, especially in rooms full of people who earned more in a day than I did in a year. "You know," Marcus continued, his arms still around my shoulders, "I'm so proud that I can take care of my mother the way she took care of me. Mom, I hope you're enjoying that $7,000 a month I send you. It's the least I can do for the woman who sacrificed everything for me." The room erupted in appreciative murmurs and renewed applause. Several women nodded approvingly, and I heard whispered comments about what a devoted son he was. But I felt like I'd been struck by lightning. $7,000 a month? What was he talking about? I worked 60 hours a week across 3 jobs, cleaning offices at night, stocking shelves at the grocery store in the early mornings, and doing alterations for a local tailor shop in the afternoons. I lived in a 1-bedroom apartment and drove a 15-year-old Honda that I constantly worried would break down. The confusion must have shown on my face because Marcus squeezed my shoulder and chuckled. "Oh, she's so modest. Always trying to make everyone else feel better about their success." "Marcus," I said quietly, my voice barely audible over the ambient noise. "I don't know what you're talking about. I work 60 hours a week. I have 3 jobs. I haven't received any. 7,000 a month? A woman interrupted, her voice pitched with curiosity. That's so generous. What a wonderful son. More approving murmurs filled the room. Someone started a small toast to Marcus's generosity, and glasses clinked around us. But across the room, I saw Sophia's face change. The practiced smile faltered for just a moment, and her champagne glass froze halfway to her lips. Our eyes met, and I saw something flicker there, surprise, confusion, and then quick calculation. She knew. Whatever this $7,000 story was about, Sophia knew it wasn't real. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. Not only was my son lying about giving me money I'd never seen, but his wife clearly knew the truth. They had all conspired to make me look like, what? A kept woman? A charity case? Or worse, someone who is ungrateful for generosity I'd never received? I need some air, I managed to say, extricating myself from Marcus's grip. Of course, Mom. The champagne can be a bit much, he said with an indulgent smile. There's a nice breeze on the terrace. I walked through the French doors onto the sprawling deck, my hands shaking. The December air was crisp, and the lights of Dallas stretched out below like a constellation of possibilities I'd never been able to reach. Behind me, the party continued. I could hear Marcus holding court, probably spinning more stories about his magnanimous support of his aging mother. The laughter and chatter felt like a soundtrack to my humiliation. What hurt most wasn't the lie itself, it was the ease with which he'd told it. The comfort he felt in using me as a prop in his performance of being a good son. And underneath it all was a terrible question. If he was telling people he gave me $7,000 a month, where was that money actually going? I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app, though I already knew what I'd find. My checking account balance, $847.32. My savings, $1,203.15. The same meager amounts I'd been carefully managing for months. Sophia appeared beside me, sliding the terrace door closed behind her. Hillary, she said, her voice honey-sweet, but with an edge I'd learned to recognize. You look a little pale. Are you feeling all right? I turned to study her face. At 32, she was beautiful in that manufactured way that money perfected, everything lifted, smoothed, and enhanced. But her green eyes were calculating, and I could see the wheels turning behind them. I'm fine, I said carefully. Just needed some quiet. Marcus gets so excited when he talks about taking care of you, she continued, moving closer. He's always been generous to a fault. Sometimes I worry he's too giving, you know? The warning was subtle but clear. Don't rock the boat. Don't ask uncomfortable questions. Accept the story and move on. Sophia, I said quietly, I've never received a penny from Marcus beyond birthday and Christmas gifts. What is this $7,000 allowance he's talking about? For just a moment, her mask slipped completely. I saw surprise, then panic, then the quick reorganization of someone used to covering up uncomfortable truths. Oh, Hillary, she laughed, but it sounded forced. Maybe you forgot? You know, at our age, sometimes financial details can get confusing. I'm sure if you check your accounts more carefully. I'm 59, not 90, I interrupted. And I balance my checkbook to the penny every month because I have to. I know exactly where every dollar comes from and where it goes. Sophia's smile hardened. Well, I'm sure there's some explanation. Marcus handles so many financial arrangements. Maybe it's going into an investment account for you, or there's some trust situation you're not aware of. But even as she spoke, I could see her mind racing. She was trying to figure out how much trouble this could cause, how to contain the damage. That's when it hit me. If Marcus was claiming to give me $7,000 a month, and that money wasn't reaching me, then either he was lying for tax purposes, or the money was going somewhere else. And given Sophia's reaction, I had a pretty good idea where that might be. I should get back inside, Sophia said abruptly. The Hoffmans are leaving soon, and Marcus wants to finalize the deal with Richard before New Year's. She paused at the door, her hand on the handle. Without turning around, she said, "Hillary, I hope you know how much we both love you. Family is everything to us. It would be such a shame if anything disrupted that." The threat was delivered with the same sweet tone she used to order the housekeeper around. I stayed on the terrace for another 10 minutes, letting the cold air clear my head. When I finally went back inside, the party was winding down. Marcus was engaged in animated conversation with a group of investors, gesticulating with the passion of someone closing a deal. I walked over and waited for a break in the conversation. "Marcus, I'm going to head home now. Thank you for inviting me." He turned with that practiced smile. "Of course, Mom. I'm so glad you could make it. And remember, if you ever need anything at all, you just let me know. Taking care of you is my privilege." The group nodded approvingly, and someone mentioned again what a good son he was. I looked at this man I'd raised, this person I'd worked 3 jobs to put through college, whose startup dreams I'd funded with a second mortgage on my house. He looked back at me with affection that seemed genuine but felt hollow. "I love you, Marcus," I said quietly. "I hope you know that." "I love you too, Mom. Drive safely." I collected my coat from Maria, who squeezed my hand again and whispered, "Take care of yourself, Mrs. Bell." The drive back to my apartment was a blur of streetlights and racing thoughts. I parked in my assigned spot and climbed the stairs to my 1-bedroom unit, my heels echoing in the empty stairwell. Inside, I kicked off my shoes and sat on my second-hand couch, still in my party dress. The silence felt enormous after the noise and chaos of the evening. On my coffee table sat a stack of bills I'd been organizing: electricity, car insurance, rent, groceries. All carefully budgeted against my paychecks from 3 jobs that kept me busy 7 days a week. I opened my laptop and logged into my bank account again, as if the numbers might have changed in the past hour. They hadn't. Then I opened a new browser window and started searching. Monthly allowance tax deduction. Claiming dependent adult child support. Financial elder abuse. The more I read, the clearer it became. If Marcus was claiming he gave me $7,000 a month, $84,000 a year, he was either getting a substantial tax benefit from it, or he was actually paying that money to someone else and using me as cover. Given Sophia's reaction, I was betting on the latter. I sat back in my chair and felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Not hurt, not confusion, but a cold, clear anger that settled in my chest like ice. For 31 years, I'd been the perfect mother. Patient, sacrificing, supportive. I'd worked double shifts to pay for his textbooks. I'd mortgaged my house to fund his first business venture. I'd celebrated his successes and comforted him through his failures, never asking for anything in return except his happiness. And tonight, he'd used me as a prop in his performance of generosity, lying to a room full of influential people about money I'd never seen. I thought about Sophia's threat on the terrace, about the practiced ease with which Marcus had delivered his lie, about the appreciative nods and comments from guests who now believed I was living on my son's charity while I actually worked myself to exhaustion just to pay rent. Tomorrow, I would go to work at 5 a.m., stocking shelves while my joints ached. Tomorrow night, I would clean offices until 11 p.m., emptying trash cans and scrubbing toilets. And for what? So my son could lie about supporting me while his wife threatened me to stay quiet? No. I pulled out my phone and opened the Notes app. At the top, I typed, "The allowance. What really happened?" Then I started writing. Every detail I could remember from the evening. Every conversation. Every reaction. The exact words Marcus had used. The look on Sophia's face. the warning she'd given me. By the time I finished, it was 3 a.m. I had to be at the grocery store in 2 hours. But for the first time in months, I felt awake. I thought about something my mother used to say. Hillary, never let anyone make you small. And if they try, make sure they regret it. I'd forgotten that lesson somewhere along the way. But tonight, at a Christmas party where I'd been turned into a decoration and a lie, I remembered it. Marcus and Sophia thought they were dealing with a harmless old woman who would accept any story and keep quiet to preserve family peace. They were about to learn how wrong they were. If this story is resonating with you, if you've ever felt invisible or taken advantage of by those who should protect you, then you're in exactly the right place. Don't just listen and leave. Hit subscribe so you'll never miss another story that speaks to your soul. Ring that notification bell, because Hillary's journey is just beginning, and what happens next will show you the power that comes from refusing to stay silent. Drop a comment below if you've ever been in a situation where family made you feel small. You're not alone, and your voice matters here. Now, let's see what happens when a woman decides she's done being underestimated. The alarm went off at 4:30 a.m. on December 24th, just like it had every morning for the past 3 years. I'd managed exactly 90 minutes of sleep, but adrenaline was better than coffee. As I pulled on my grocery store uniform, a polyester vest that made me invisible to everyone except the managers who expected perfection, I thought about the question that had kept me awake. Where was my $7,000 a month? The grocery store was a 20-minute drive through empty Dallas streets. At 5 a.m., the world belonged to people like me, invisible workers who kept society running while everyone else slept. I clocked in and grabbed my handheld scanner, joining the small army of early shift employees who would stock shelves and prepare the store for the day's customers. "Morning, Hillary," called Janet, a 53-year-old grandmother who'd been doing this job for 8 years. "You look tired, honey." "Long night," I said, scanning my first case of cereal. "Hey, Janet, can I ask you something? If someone was claiming they gave you money every month for tax purposes, but you never actually received it, what would you call that?" Janet paused in her stocking and looked at me with concern. "That would be fraud, honey. Either tax fraud if they're lying to the government, or theft if they're keeping money that's supposed to go to you." "Why?" "Just curious," I said, but my hands were shaking as I placed boxes of Cheerios on the shelf. As I worked, memories flooded back, memories I'd somehow managed to suppress or reframe over the years. Marcus, at 18, accepted to Stanford with a partial scholarship that still left us short $12,000 a year. I'd worked 16-hour days that summer, taking on extra catering gigs and cleaning jobs, selling everything I owned that wasn't essential. When it still wasn't enough, I'd gone to the bank and taken out a second mortgage on my little house. The house my ex-husband and I had bought when Marcus was 2, before he decided that fatherhood was too much responsibility and disappeared to find himself in Colorado. "Mrs. Bell," the loan officer had said, "this is a significant risk. If something happens to your income—" "My son is going to Stanford," I'd replied. "I'll make it work." And I had made it work. For 4 years, I'd made every payment, even when it meant eating pasta and canned tomatoes for weeks at a time. Marcus, at 22, graduating summa cum laude and moving to Dallas for his first job at an investment firm. I'd been so proud, driving down for his graduation in my old Honda with the cracked windshield. He'd hugged me in front of his classmates and said, "Mom, I'm going to make so much money that you'll never have to worry about anything again." I'd believed him. Marcus, at 25, leaving the investment firm to start his own company. "Mom, this is it. This is going to make us both rich. I just need some seed money to get started." I'd refinance my house again, this time against the equity I'd managed to build up by working 7 days a week for 3 years. $50,000, which seemed like a fortune to me, but was just the beginning for Marcus. I'll pay you back with interest, he'd promised. Within 2 years, you'll be living in a house twice as nice as this one. Marcus at 28, when his first company failed, but his second one showed promise. The house I'd mortgaged twice was now underwater financially, but Marcus needed another $40,000 to keep his business afloat. Mom, I know it's a lot to ask, but this is just temporary. Once we get the Johnson contract, everything changes. I'd sold my house and moved into a rental apartment, giving him the proceeds after paying off what was left of the mortgages. I'd told myself it was an investment in our future. Marcus at 30, when his business finally took off and he became the golden boy of Dallas tech startups. I'd expected things to change then. I'd imagined he'd buy me a small house, or at least help with rent. Instead, he bought himself a mansion in Highland Park and started dating models and socialites. Mom, you understand I have to reinvest everything back into the business right now. Growth phase is crucial. But don't worry, I'll always take care of you. And somehow, I'd convinced myself that this was temporary. That once he was truly established, once he felt secure, he'd remember all the sacrifices I'd made. Marcus at 33, marrying Sophia in a wedding that cost more than I'd made in 5 years. I'd watched from the third row as she walked down an aisle scattered with white roses that cost $50 each, wearing a dress that could have covered my rent for a year. At the reception, Marcus had given a speech thanking me for teaching him the value of hard work and determination. Everyone had applauded, and several people had commented on what a good son he was for including me in his success story. But by then, I was working 3 jobs just to afford my 1-bedroom apartment. Now, at 59, stocking shelves in a grocery store at dawn while my billionaire son told his friends he gave me $7,000 a month, I finally saw the pattern clearly. I had been performing the role of the grateful, supported mother while actually living in poverty. Marcus had been performing the role of the dutiful, generous son while actually letting me struggle. And everyone around us had believed the performance because it was easier than looking at the reality. My phone buzzed with a text message from Marcus. Mom, thanks for coming last night. Hope you got home safely. Love you. I stared at the message for a long moment. No mention of the allowance conversation. No acknowledgement that I'd seemed confused. No follow-up about where this mysterious $7,000 might be. Just a generic message designed to maintain the illusion that everything was fine. I finished my shift at the grocery store and drove across town to the office building where I cleaned at night. But first, I had 6 hours to kill and research to do. I parked outside the public library and spent the morning diving deeper into tax law, dependency claims, and financial fraud. What I learned made my blood run cold. If Marcus was claiming me as a dependent and stating that he provided over half my support, he could potentially save thousands in taxes every year. If he was actually writing checks for $7,000 a month, but they weren't coming to me, then either he was committing tax fraud or someone else was receiving money meant for me. I also learned about something called financial elder abuse. A crime that included not just stealing from elderly people, but also lying about supporting them for financial gain. At 64, I would qualify as an elder under the law. By 2 p.m., I was at the tailor shop, taking in alterations and hemming dresses for women who spent more on a single outfit than I made in a month. Mrs. Patterson, the shop owner, noticed I was distracted. Hillary, dear, is everything all right? You seem upset about something. Mrs. Patterson was 72 and had run this shop for 40 years. She'd hired me when I was desperate for work that I could do during traditional business hours, and she'd been unfailingly kind. Can I ask you something? I said, pinning a hem on a cocktail dress. If someone in your family was lying about giving you money, using you for tax benefits, and making you look like a charity case to their friends, what would you do? Mrs. Patterson set down the suit she was pressing and looked at me seriously. Hillary, that sounds like more than just family drama. That sounds like fraud. And if it's happening to someone your age, it could be elder abuse, which carries serious penalties. Hypothetically, I said carefully. Hypothetically, she replied, I'd document everything, get legal advice, and then I'd make sure the whole world knew the truth. Some things are too important for family loyalty. That evening, I drove to the office complex, where I cleaned from 7 p.m. to 11 p.m. The building was home to several law firms, accounting practices, and consulting companies. As I emptied trash cans and vacuumed carpets, I thought about the irony of cleaning the offices of people who made more in an hour than I made in a week. But tonight, the irony felt different. Tonight, it felt like reconnaissance. I'd been cleaning these offices for 2 years, and I'd gotten to know which lawyers specialized in what. Henderson and Associates handled corporate law. Martinez family law dealt with divorces and custody issues. But on the 7th floor was Blackwood elder law, and I'd seen their brochures in the bathroom trash. They specialized in financial elder abuse cases. At 10:45, as I was finishing up the 7th floor, I made a decision that would have terrified me 24 hours earlier. I walked into the Blackwood elder law office and left a note on the receptionist's desk. My name is Hillary Bell. I believe my son is committing financial elder abuse by claiming he supports me while letting me work 3 jobs to survive. I need advice on how to prove this and what my options are. Please call me. I left my phone number and the date. Then I went home and spent another sleepless night documenting everything I could remember about my financial relationship with Marcus over the past 30 years. Bank records, tax documents, loan papers, everything I could find. By Christmas morning, I had filled a notebook with dates, amounts, and details. I also had a plan. Marcus and Sophia were hosting Christmas dinner for Sophia's family and a few close friends. 24 hours ago, I would have gone and played my role as the grateful mother, accepting their performance of generosity while hiding my own struggles. But that was before I learned about the $7,000 I'd never seen. I called Marcus at noon. Merry Christmas, Mom. Are you excited for dinner? Sophia's made reservations at the club for 2 o'clock. Actually, Marcus, I won't be able to make it. I'm not feeling well. Oh no. Is there anything you need? Should I send the doctor over? The concern in his voice sounded genuine, which somehow made it worse. He could care about my immediate health while completely ignoring my financial well-being. I'm fine, just tired. Working 3 jobs takes a lot out of a person. There was a pause. Mom, you know you don't have to work so hard. We've talked about this. Have we? When did we talk about this, Marcus? Another pause, longer this time. Well, I mean, you know you can always come to me if you need anything. I take care of you, don't I? Do you? How exactly do you take care of me? I could hear voices in the background, probably Sophia's family arriving for dinner. Mom, is everything okay? You sound upset. I'm just tired, Marcus. Tired of a lot of things. We should talk soon, though. Really talk. Of course. After the holidays, we'll have lunch and catch up properly. I love you, Mom. I love you too, I said, and I meant it. But love and trust were 2 different things, and I was finally learning the difference. I spent Christmas Day alone for the first time in years, but I wasn't lonely. I was planning. The law office of Blackwood Elder Law was located in a modest building that felt more like a family practice than a corporate firm. On December 27th, I sat in their waiting room, my hands folded in my lap, wearing my best interview outfit, the same navy dress I'd worn to Marcus's party, but this time it felt like armor. Mrs. Bell. A woman in her 40s emerged from an inner office. I'm Patricia Blackwood. Thank you for reaching out to us. Patricia Blackwood had kind eyes but a firm handshake. Her office was warm and unpretentious, filled with family photos and diplomas that spoke of someone who'd built her career on helping people rather than impressing them. I have to admit, your note intrigued me, she said, settling behind her desk. Can you tell me more about your situation? I pulled out the notebook I'd been filling for days and began with a Christmas party. Patricia listened without interrupting, occasionally making notes, her expression growing more serious as I continued. Mrs. Bell, based on what you're telling me, there are several potential legal issues here. If your son is claiming you as a dependent for tax purposes while you're financially independent, that's tax fraud. If he's claiming to provide support he doesn't actually provide, that could be elder financial abuse under Texas law. But how can we prove it? I asked. That's the key question. We'd need to see tax documents, bank records, any written communications about financial support. Do you have access to any of that? I shook my head. Marcus handles all his own financial affairs. I don't even know who his accountant is. Patricia leaned back in her chair. There are ways to get that information, but it would require filing a complaint and starting an investigation. Are you prepared for that? This kind of case can get ugly, especially when family is involved. I thought about Marcus's speech at the party, about Sophia's thread on the terrace, about 30 years of working myself to exhaustion while my son built his empire. I'm prepared, I said. Good. Here's what we're going to do. First, you're going to gather every financial document you have, tax returns, bank statements, loan papers, everything. Second, you're going to start keeping a detailed log of all communications with your son about money. Third, if you're comfortable with it, you're going to start recording conversations. Is that legal? Texas is a one-party consent state. As long as you're part of the conversation, you can record it legally. And Mrs. Bell? Patricia leaned forward. Start looking for allies. People who've witnessed these conversations or who might have information about your son's financial claims. I left the law office with a plan and a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years. But first, I needed information, and I knew exactly where to start. Maria Santos had been Marcus and Sophia's housekeeper for 3 years. She was in her 50s, a hardworking woman who sent most of her earnings back to family in Mexico. Over the years, we developed a friendly relationship based on our shared status as women who worked to support people who barely noticed us. I found her at the Highland Park Whole Foods on her day off, shopping for groceries. Mrs. Bell, how lovely to see you. Did you enjoy the Christmas party? It was interesting, I said carefully. Maria, can I buy you coffee? I'd like to talk to you about something. We settled into a corner table at the Starbucks inside the store. Maria looked nervous, which told me she already suspected what this might be about. Maria, I need to ask you something, and I want you to know that whatever you tell me, it won't affect your job. I would never do anything to hurt you. She nodded slowly. What do you want to know? At the party, Marcus told everyone he gives me $7,000 a month. Do you know anything about that? Maria's face went pale. She looked around the coffee shop, then leaned closer. Mrs. Bell, I clean their office. I see the papers sometimes when I dust. There are checks written every month for $7,000, but they're not to you. My heart started pounding. Who are they to? To a woman named S. Torres. I see them in the checkbook when Mrs. Sophia leaves it on the desk. S. Torres. Sophia Torres, Sophia's maiden name that she still used for some financial accounts. Maria, would you be willing to testify to that if needed? She hesitated for a long moment. Mrs. Bell, I need this job. My daughter is in college. My mother needs medicine. I understand, I said quickly. I would never ask you to risk your livelihood. But if there was a way to help me prove this without endangering your job, would you consider it? She nodded slowly. You have been kind to me always. Mrs. Sophia, she is not always kind. That afternoon, I called Marcus.
Mom.
How are you feeling? Better, I hope. Much better, thank you. Marcus, I was hoping we could have that lunch you mentioned. There are some things I'd like to discuss with you. Of course. Is everything all right? Oh, yes, just some financial questions. You know how confusing these things can get at my age. I hated playing into his assumptions about aging and confusion, but I needed him relaxed and unguarded. How about Friday? I'll pick you up at noon, and we'll go to the club. The Highland Park Country Club was Marcus's favorite place to conduct business that wasn't quite business. Private, exclusive, and full of people he wanted to impress. It was also the perfect place to record a conversation, since the ambient noise would cover any slight mechanical sounds from my phone. Friday arrived gray and cold, typical for Dallas in late December. Marcus picked me up in his Tesla, looking relaxed and casual in expensive jeans and a cashmere sweater. You look great, Mom. I'm glad you're feeling better. Thank you, dear. It's nice to spend time together, just the two of us. The club was elegant in that understated way that only the truly wealthy could afford. We were seated at a corner table overlooking the golf course, and Marcus ordered wine while I stuck to water. So, he said, settling back in his chair, what financial questions did you want to discuss? I pulled out my phone and placed it on the table next to my water glass, as if I'd simply set it down casually. The recording app was already running. Well, Marcus, at your Christmas party, you mentioned giving me an allowance. $7,000 a month. I think you said? He smiled. Right, yes. I hope that's enough. I know it's not a fortune, but I wanted to make sure you were comfortable. It's very generous, I said carefully. But I have to admit, I'm a little confused about the details. Which account does it go into? For the first time, Marcus looked uncertain. Which account? Yes, I have my checking account at Wells Fargo and my small savings account there too. I don't see the deposits, so I wondered if you were putting it somewhere else for me. Marcus took a sip of wine, and I could see him thinking, Mom, don't worry about those details. The important thing is that you're taken care of. But I am worried, Marcus. You see, I've been working 3 jobs, and if there's $7,000 a month that I should be getting, I'd like to access it. It would mean I could cut back on work, maybe even retire. The silence stretched between us. Marcus set down his wine glass and studied my face. Mom, what exactly are you asking me? I'm asking you to show me where the $7,000 a month is. Because I've never received it, and I need to understand why you told all those people at the party that you were giving it to me. His jaw tightened. Are you accusing me of lying? I'm asking you to explain a discrepancy. You told a room full of people that you give me $7,000 a month. I work 60 hours a week to pay my rent. Those two facts don't match. Marcus leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper. Mom, I think you might be confused. Sometimes, at our age, financial details can get mixed up. I'm 59, not 90, and I balance my checkbook to the penny because I have to. Well, maybe you forgot about some arrangement we made. Maybe it's going into a trust for you, or there's some investment account you're not remembering. He was using almost exactly the same word Sophia had used on the terrace. They'd clearly discussed this possibility and coordinated their response. Marcus, I said quietly, I need you to be honest with me. Are you actually giving me $7,000 a month, or were you lying at the party? He stared at me for a long moment, and I saw something shift in his expression. The mask of concern slipped, revealing something harder underneath. Mom, I think you're getting worked up over nothing. Maybe you should talk to someone about this confusion. There are doctors who specialize in age-related memory issues. The insult was delivered so smoothly, so casually, that it took my breath away. He was gaslighting me, trying to make me question my own sanity rather than answer a direct question. My memory is fine, Marcus. My bank account balance is $847. If you're giving me $7,000 a month, where is it? He signaled the waiter for the check. I think we should cut this short. You're clearly upset about something, and I don't want to make it worse. The only thing I'm upset about is being lied about in front of a room full of people. And the only thing that would make it worse is you continuing to lie to me now. Marcus stood up abruptly. I'm not going to sit here and be accused of lying by my own mother, especially when I've been nothing but generous to you your entire life. The hypocrisy was staggering. But what shocked me more was the coldness in his voice. This wasn't the Marcus I'd raised, the boy I'd worked 3 jobs to support. This was a stranger who saw me as an obstacle to be managed. You're right, I said, standing as well. You have been generous. You've generously allowed me to work myself to exhaustion while you told people you were supporting me. You've generously let me believe you cared about my welfare while using me for tax benefits. Very generous indeed. I picked up my phone and walked out of the restaurant, leaving Marcus at the table with a wine glass and a check he could well afford. In the parking lot, I stopped the recording and saved it to 3 different cloud storage accounts. That evening, I called Patricia Blackwood. I got it, I told her. He never denied the money exists, but he refused to explain where it goes. And he tried to gaslight me about memory problems when I asked direct questions. That's excellent work, Mrs. Bell. Evasion combined with mental competency attacks is a classic pattern in elder financial abuse cases. How are you feeling? Angry, I said honestly, but clear. For the first time in years, I feel completely clear about what's happening. Good. Anger can be useful if you channel it properly. What's your next step? I looked at the notebook I'd been filling with information, the printed bank statements showing years of financial struggle, the recording of Marcus's evasions and insults. I think it's time to start planting some seeds, I said. Over the next week, I made several strategic moves. First, I opened a new bank account at a different institution and began direct depositing my paychecks there. If Marcus was monitoring my finances, I wanted some privacy. Second, I reached out to Janet from the grocery store. She'd worked in accounting before taking the retail job, and I asked if she'd help me organize my financial documents for tax purposes. Hillary, honey, these records show someone living paycheck to paycheck, she said, reviewing my bank statements. If someone's claiming they give you $84,000 a year, they're lying through their teeth. Third, I called my cousin Rebecca in Houston. We hadn't spoken in 2 years, but she was a CPA with her own practice. Hillary, what a lovely surprise. How are Marcus and that gorgeous wife of his? That's actually what I'm calling about, Rebecca. I need some advice about tax implications if someone claims they're supporting you, but they're not actually giving you money. There was a pause. That sounds like fraud, Hillary. Both tax fraud and potentially elder abuse fraud, depending on the circumstances. What's going on? I told her about the Christmas party and Marcus's evasions at lunch.
Jesus, Hillary.
You know, I never liked that boy's attitude, even when he was young. Too entitled, too comfortable letting other people pay his way. But this is criminal behavior. What should I do? Document everything. Get a lawyer who specializes in elder law. And honey, don't let family loyalty stop you from protecting yourself. Blood doesn't give people the right to steal from you. By January 15th, I had assembled a comprehensive file. Bank records going back 5 years showing my actual income and expenses. Tax documents proving I'd never claimed or received support from Marcus. The recording of our lunch conversation. Witness statements from Maria about checks written to S. Torres. Patricia Blackwood's assessment that I had grounds for both criminal and civil complaints. But I wasn't ready to file anything yet. First, I wanted to understand the full scope of what Marcus and Sophia had been doing. That required a different kind of investigation. I spent Saturday afternoon at the Highland Park Library, using their computers to research public records. Property deeds, business filings, tax lien records, all the paper trails that the wealthy left behind despite their attempts at privacy. What I found made my blood boil. Marcus owned not just his mansion, but 3 other properties in Dallas. A downtown condo worth $800,000. A lake house in East Texas worth $1.2 million, and a commercial building that housed his business offices, worth $2.3 million. His company, Bell Strategic Consulting, had reported revenues of $12 million the previous year. Sophia owned a boutique in Bishop Arts District and had recently invested in 2 restaurants. Together, they were worth approximately $18 million. And I was working 3 jobs to afford a 1-bedroom apartment. But the most infuriating discovery came when I cross-referenced property ownership with the dates of my mortgage refinancing. The commercial building Marcus used for his offices had been purchased in 2019, the same year I'd sold my house and given him the proceeds. My $90,000 had been the down payment on his $2.3 million office building. I sat in the library parking lot for 20 minutes, shaking with rage. Not just at the theft, but at the casual cruelty of it. Marcus had built his empire with my money and my labor, then let me struggle in poverty while claiming he supported me. That evening, I made a decision that would have terrified the woman I'd been 6 months earlier. I was going to destroy them, not with violence or illegal behavior, but with the truth. I was going to expose every lie, every theft, every manipulation. I was going to make sure that everyone who'd applauded Marcus's generosity at that Christmas party knew exactly what kind of man he really was. But I was going to do it strategically, methodically, and completely. The war had begun, and they had no idea they were fighting it. The Highland Park Public Library became my second office over the next 2 weeks. Every morning after my grocery store shift, I claimed a computer in the far corner and began what I privately called Operation Truth Extraction. If Marcus and Sophia thought they were dealing with a confused old woman who would accept their lies and manipulation, they were about to learn how wrong they were. But first, I needed to understand exactly who I was fighting. Marcus I knew, or thought I did. But Sophia Torres Bell was a mystery I needed to solve. I started with social media, working backward through her digital history like an archaeologist uncovering layers of deception. Her current Instagram was a carefully curated showcase of wealth and philanthropy. Designer outfits, charity galas, exotic vacations. Every post designed to project success and social consciousness. But Instagram only went back to 2018, and I knew she'd been in Dallas longer than that. I moved to Facebook, where people were less careful about scrubbing their histories. Sophia's profile was locked down, but her old posts from 2015 to 2017 were still visible to the public. And that's where I found the first crack in her facade. In 2016, she'd been Sophia Torres, working as a marketing consultant and posting regularly about her struggles as a small business owner. Photos of her tiny apartment, complaints about difficult clients, requests for referrals, and networking opportunities. Nothing wrong with that. Everyone struggled before they succeeded. But the timeline was interesting. According to her posts, she'd met Marcus in early 2017 at a networking event. I cross-referenced this with Marcus's own social media history. In January 2017, he'd posted about attending a charity auction for homeless veterans. In February, he'd posted a photo from the same charity's board meeting, mentioning his new advisory role with their fundraising committee. By March, he was posting couple photos with Sophia. I printed out the charity's tax filings and donor lists from the library's database access. The organization was legitimate but small. They raised maybe $50,000 a year for local veteran services. And there, in the 2016 donor list, was a name that made my blood run cold. S. Torres. $2,000 donation. Sophia had donated to a veterans charity in 2016, then met Marcus at one of their events in 2017. A year later, she was driving a Mercedes and living in a Highland Park mansion. But the real treasure trove came when I searched property records for S. Torres going back 10 years. In 2014, Sofia Torres had owned a small condo in Plano worth about $120,000. She'd sold it in late 2017 for $135,000, shortly after she and Marcus got serious. But more interesting was what happened next. In early 2018, an LLC called ST Holdings had purchased a luxury condo in downtown Dallas for $600,000 cash. ST Holdings. Sofia Torres Holdings. I requested the business filing records for ST Holdings through the library's legal database access. The sole owner was listed as Sofia Torres Bell, with the business address being Marcus's office building, the one he'd bought with my money. Sofia had gone from owning a $120,000 condo to controlling a $600,000 downtown property in less than 6 months. The math didn't work unless someone else was providing the financing. I was beginning to understand where my $7,000 a month was going. That afternoon, I drove to the downtown condo building. It was one of those sleek, modern towers that catered to young professionals and wealthy empty nesters. The kind of place where a one-bedroom cost more per month than I made at all 3 jobs combined. I sat in my Honda across the street and called the building's leasing office. "Hi, I'm interested in possibly purchasing a unit in your building. Can you tell me about the ownership structure? Are most units owner-occupied or rentals?" "We're about 60% owner-occupied," the cheerful leasing agent replied. "The other 40% are investment properties. Very popular with investors because of our location and amenities." "That's great. Do you happen to know if unit, let me see, 2847 is owner-occupied or a rental?" I was guessing at the number, but I wanted to see if she'd give me information about Sofia's unit. "Oh, 2847 is definitely a rental. Beautiful unit, too. Actually, I think it just went on the market again. The previous tenant's lease ended, and the owner is looking for someone new." Bingo. Sofia owned a rental property worth $600,000, purchased with cash shortly after she married Marcus. The rental income alone would be at least $3,000 a month, probably more. That evening, I expanded my search beyond property records. I looked up civil court filings, marriage records, and business licenses going back 15 years. What I found painted a picture of someone far more calculating than the sweet socialite Sofia played at charity events. In 2012, Torres had been sued by a former roommate for $8,000 in unpaid rent and utilities. The case had been settled out of court. In 2013, she'd been involved in a small claims dispute with a wedding photographer over a canceled contract. Again, settled out of court. In 2014, she'd filed for bankruptcy protection, listing debts of $45,000 and assets of $12,000. And in 2015, she'd been the subject of a restraining order filed by a man named Richard Hoffman, who accused her of harassment, threats, and financial manipulation after the end of their relationship. I pulled the restraining order filing from the court records. Richard Hoffman was 68 years old, a widowed retired architect. According to his statement, he'd met Sofia at a coffee shop where she'd approached him for help with her struggling marketing business. Over 6 months, she'd convinced him to invest $30,000 in her company, moved into his house rent-free, and gradually taken control of his social and financial life. When he discovered she was also seeing other men, he'd confronted her. She'd responded by threatening to claim he'd been abusive and to destroy his reputation in the community. The restraining order had been granted, and Hoffman had sued to recover his $30,000. That case was also settled out of court, but the pattern was clear. Sofia Torres was a professional predator who targeted older, wealthy men. And now she was married to my son. I spent the weekend creating a comprehensive timeline of Sofia's history. The bankruptcy in 2014. The restraining order in 2015. The mysterious financial recovery that allowed her to donate $2,000 to charity in 2016. Meeting Marcus in 2017. marriage and sudden wealth in 2018. But I wasn't done yet. If Sophia had a pattern of targeting wealthy older men, there might be others. Men who'd been too embarrassed or intimidated to pursue legal action. I found Richard Hoffman's address in the public records and made a decision that would have seemed unthinkable a month earlier. I was going to pay him a visit. Richard Hoffman lived in a modest but well-maintained house in Lake Highlands, the kind of neighborhood where middle-class retirees could afford to live comfortably. I rang his doorbell on Monday morning after my grocery store shift, but before I had to be at the tailor shop. The man who answered was tall and thin, with silver hair and cautious eyes. He looked at me suspiciously through the screen door. "Mr. Hoffman? My name is Hillary Bell. I'd like to talk to you about Sophia Torres." His face went pale, and he stepped back from the door. "I don't want any trouble," he said quickly. I signed papers. I agreed not to discuss what happened. "Mr. Hoffman, I'm not here to cause trouble for you. I'm here because I think she's doing to my son what she did to you. And I think she might be stealing money that's supposed to be going to me." He studied my face for a long moment, then unlatched the screen door. "Come in," he said quietly. "But I can only give you 10 minutes. Richard Hoffman's living room was neat and comfortable, filled with architectural books and framed photos of what looked like vacation trips with a woman I assumed was his late wife. "She was very good," he said without preamble. "Very convincing. She made me feel like I was helping a young woman achieve her dreams. She was grateful, affectionate, made me feel important." "How did you meet her?" "At a coffee shop near my office. She was at the next table, crying over some paperwork. I asked if she was okay, and she said she was trying to save her marketing business, but couldn't afford the software she needed. The same story she'd probably used on other targets. Create a crisis, accept help gratefully, then gradually escalate the requests." "She moved in with you?" Richard nodded, looking ashamed. "My wife had been gone for 3 years. I was lonely, and Sophia made me feel alive again. She said she loved me, that she wanted to build a life together. She talked about marriage, about traveling together once her business was successful. But she was seeing other people? At least 2 other men that I know of. I found out when one of them called the house looking for her. When I confronted her, she turned vicious. Said she'd tell people I'd been inappropriate with her, that she'd ruin my reputation. She knew about my work with the church, my volunteer activities with senior citizens. She knew exactly what accusations would destroy me. I thought about Sophia's threat to me on the terrace. The same calculated approach to intimidation. The settlement you signed, does it prevent you from talking about financial fraud?" Richard looked startled. I don't think so. It was about not discussing the personal relationship or making public statements that could damage her reputation. "Why?" "Because I think she's running the same con on my son that she ran on you. Except this time, she's using money that's supposed to be going to me." I explained about the $7,000 monthly checks to S. Torres, about Marcus's claims of supporting me while I worked 3 jobs. Richard listened with growing anger. "She's still doing it. She's still stealing from people and using shame to cover it up. Would you be willing to help me prove it?" He was quiet for a long moment. "What kind of help?" "I need to establish a pattern of financial manipulation. If there were others like you, men who invested money in her or supported her financially, it would show this isn't just a family dispute. It's criminal behavior." Richard walked to a filing cabinet and pulled out a thick folder. "I kept copies of everything," he said. "Bank transfers, loan agreements, text messages. Even after I settled, I kept it all. I told myself it was just in case she came back, but really, I think I kept it because I knew someday someone would need proof of what she really is." He handed me the folder. "There's a phone number in there for another man named David Chin. He called me after my restraining order became public record. Said she'd done something similar to him, but he'd been too embarrassed to report it. I left Richard Hoffman's house with a treasure trove of evidence and the beginning of a network. If Sophia had multiple victims, I could build a case that went far beyond family drama. That evening, I called David Chun. He was even more reluctant to talk than Richard had been, but when I explained my situation, he agreed to meet me for coffee. David Chun was a 55-year-old accountant whose wife had died of cancer in 2015. He'd met Sophia through an online grief support group. She said she'd lost her fiancé in a car accident, David told me, stirring his coffee nervously. We talked for months before we met in person. She seemed to understand what I was going through. The same pattern: find someone vulnerable, build trust, then exploit it. She needed help with tax issues for her business. Since I'm an accountant, I offered to help for free. Then she needed help with a business loan. Then her apartment lease was in trouble, and could I help with a deposit on a new place? Over 8 months, David had given Sophia nearly $20,000. When he'd finally realized she was manipulating him, he confronted her. She said I'd been paying for sex, essentially. That she'd tell people I'd hired her as an escort if I caused trouble. She knew I had a teenage daughter, knew I couldn't afford that kind of scandal. I now had 3 victims of Sophia's financial manipulation schemes, all older men, all isolated by grief or loneliness. A clear pattern of predatory behavior that had been refined over years. But more importantly, I had proof that Sophia Torres Bell was not the reformed socialite she pretended to be. She was a career criminal who had targeted my son the same way she'd targeted other wealthy men. And if she was receiving $7,000 a month of money that was supposed to be going to me, then she was stealing from an elderly woman to fund her lifestyle, which was elder abuse under Texas law. I drove home that night with a plan forming in my mind. I had evidence of Sophia's criminal history. I had witnesses to her pattern of financial manipulation. I had recordings of Marcus's evasions and attempts to gaslight me. What I needed now was to document the current theft in real time. And I knew exactly how to do it. If Marcus and Sophia thought they were dealing with a helpless old woman, they were about to discover their mistake. But first, I needed allies inside their world, people who saw what really happened behind closed doors. I started with Maria Santos, but carefully. She'd already told me about the checks to S. Torres, but I needed more than that. I needed someone who could help me document the ongoing fraud without risking her job. On Thursday morning, I called Sophia's house phone when I knew she'd be at her weekly yoga class. Bell Residence, Maria answered. Maria, it's Hillary Bell. Is Mrs. Sophia there? No, Mrs. Bell. She's at yoga until 11. Perfect. Maria, I need to talk to you, but not over the phone. Could you meet me for coffee this afternoon? I'll pay you for your time. There was a pause. Mrs. Bell, I don't want any trouble. I promise you won't get in trouble. I just need some advice about family finances, and you're the only person I trust. We met at a small cafe in Oak Cliff, far from Highland Park where someone might recognize us. Maria looked nervous, constantly glancing around as if Sophia might materialize at any moment. Mrs. Bell, I like you very much, but I need this job. My daughter is in nursing school, and my mother needs medicine. I understand completely, Maria, and I would never ask you to risk your family's security. But I need you to know something important. Mrs. Sophia is stealing money that should be going to me. I explained about the $7,000 monthly allowance that Marcus claimed to give me, but which was actually going to S. Torres. Maria's face hardened. That woman, she said quietly. She treats everyone like servants. Mr. Marcus. He used to be nicer before he married her. What do you mean? She changed him. Now he only sees people as useful or not useful. And she is very careful about money. She counts everything, watches everything. Maria, I need to prove that those checks are going to her and not to me. Is there any way you could, accidentally, leave some financial documents where I might see them? Maria shook her head quickly. Mrs. Bell, she watches everything. She would know if something was moved. I thought for a moment, what if there was another way? What if I needed to come to the house for something legitimate? Like what? What if I was worried about Marcus? What if I thought he seemed stressed or unwell, and I needed to talk to him privately? Maria considered this. She goes to her boutique every Tuesday and Thursday afternoon from 2 to 6. If you came then, and if you were worried about Mr. Marcus's health, I could let you wait in his office while I called him.
His office.
Where the checkbook and financial documents would be. That would be very helpful, Maria. And if I happened to see something concerning while I was waiting, something that suggested Marcus was being manipulated or taken advantage of, would you be able to confirm what you've seen? She nodded slowly. Mrs. Sophia, she does not treat him well when guests are not around. She yells at him about business decisions, tells him he's not smart enough to manage money without her help. This was news. I'd assumed Sophia was just along for the ride, enjoying the wealth Marcus provided. But if she was actively controlling his business decisions, Maria, has she changed how the household is run? Different rules about money or spending? Oh, yes. Now, everything goes through her. Even my salary, even repairs to the house. She says it's more efficient, but Mr. Marcus used to just tell me to handle things myself. Financial control was a classic sign of manipulation. If Sophia had positioned herself as the manager of all household finances, it would be easy to hide money that was supposed to go to me. One more question, Maria. Does Mrs. Sophia have visitors when Marcus isn't home? Business meetings, consultants, anyone like that? Maria's face darkened. Sometimes there is a man who comes for business meetings, but they are very friendly meetings. And she always makes sure I have other work to do in another part of the house when he comes. An affair. Of course. A woman who'd built her life on manipulating men wouldn't stop just because she was married. Thank you, Maria. You've been very helpful. And remember, if anyone asks, we just talked about normal family things. I gave her $200 cash, more than she made in a day, but less than might seem suspicious if she deposited it. That evening, I called Marcus. How are you feeling? You seemed a little stressed at lunch last week. Just busy with year-end financial stuff. You know how it is. Actually, I don't know how it is. That's one of the things that worries me. You're carrying so much responsibility, and I never hear about whether you're taking care of yourself. Mom, I'm fine. Really? Marcus, I've been thinking about our conversation at the club. I know I was asking a lot of questions about financial things, and I'm sorry if I seemed confused. It's just that at my age, I want to make sure I understand how everything works. Of course. I understand. Could I come by the house sometime when you're not too busy? Maybe we could go through some of the details together so I feel more secure about my situation. There was a pause. Mom, there's really nothing to go through. I take care of everything. You don't need to worry about the details. But that's exactly why I do worry. What if something happened to you? What if I needed to access that allowance account myself? I wouldn't even know where to start. I could hear him talking to someone in the background, probably Sophia. How about this, he said finally. I'll have my accountant prepare some simple summaries for you. Nothing too complicated, just basic information about your financial security. That would be wonderful. But Marcus, could we also just sit down together sometime?
Just you and me?
I feel like we never really talk anymore.
Sure, Mom.
Let me check my calendar and get back to you. I hung up knowing he had no intention of showing me real financial documents or having an honest conversation. But I'd planted seeds of concern about his stress level and my need to understand my financial security. Tuesday afternoon, I drove to Highland Park and parked around the corner from Marcus's house. At 2:15, I rang the doorbell. Mrs. Bell. Maria looked genuinely surprised. Is everything all right? I'm worried about Marcus, Maria. He seemed so stressed when I talked to him, and I can't reach him on his cell phone. I was hoping I could wait for him to get home, Maybe talk to him about seeing a doctor. Maria glanced nervously toward the street. Mrs. Sophia is at her boutique, but she sometimes comes home early. I understand. Maybe I could wait in Marcus's office? That way I'd be out of your way. And if she does come home, you could just say I was waiting to talk to him about his health. She led me to Marcus's home office, a spacious room with built-in bookshelves and an enormous desk. Financial documents were scattered across the desktop, and an open checkbook sat next to his computer. I'll call Mr. Marcus and let him know you're here, Maria said, closing the door behind her. I had maybe 10 minutes before Marcus would arrive, assuming he dropped everything to come home. I turned on my phone's camera and started documenting. The checkbook showed entries going back 3 months, monthly checks to S. Torres for exactly $7,000, but also smaller checks to ST Holdings, Sophia's LLC. $2,000 here, $3,500 there. In just 3 months, at least $25,000 had gone to Sophia's various accounts beyond the monthly allowance. I photographed every relevant page, being careful to capture the dates, amounts, and recipient names clearly. On his desk were bank statements for multiple accounts. His primary business account showed deposits of over $800,000 in the past quarter. Marcus's consulting firm was doing very well. But there were also statements for a personal account I didn't recognize, one that showed regular transfers to investment accounts and real estate purchases. And there, in a manila folder marked tax planning, was a document that made my blood boil. It was a letter from Marcus's accountant discussing dependent support documentation for his mother. The letter outlined how Marcus could claim maximum tax benefits by providing $84,000 annually in support, and it recommended keeping detailed records of all payments. The next document was a spreadsheet titled H. Bell Support Payments, listing monthly payments of $7,000 going back 2 years. But the payments weren't going to Hillary Bell. They were listed as going to HB Trust Account. There was no HB Trust Account. I would have known if Marcus had set up a trust for me. This was pure fiction, created to justify tax deductions for money that was actually going to his wife. I photographed everything, my hands shaking with anger. For 2 years, Marcus had been claiming $84,000 annually in tax deductions for supporting me while I worked 3 jobs to survive. And all of that money was going to Sophia. My phone buzzed with a text from Maria. He's coming. 5 minutes. I quickly photographed the last few documents and returned everything to its original position. By the time Marcus burst through the office door, I was sitting in a chair by the window, looking genuinely worried. Mom, Maria said you were concerned about my health. What's wrong? I stood and hugged him, noting how tense his shoulders were. You just seemed so stressed when we talked, sweetheart. And when I couldn't reach you on your phone, I started imagining all sorts of things. My phone was on silent during a client meeting. I'm fine, really.
But he didn't look fine.
He looked exhausted, and there was something frantic in his eyes that I hadn't noticed before. Marcus, are you happy? The question seemed to surprise him. What do you mean? I mean, you've achieved everything you worked for. You're successful, you're wealthy, you have a beautiful wife. Are you happy? He sat down heavily in his desk chair. Mom, happiness it's complicated when you have this many responsibilities. What responsibilities are weighing on you? Everything. The business, the investments, keeping up with expectations. Whose expectations? He looked toward the door, as if checking to make sure we were still alone. Sophia has very specific ideas about how we should live, what we should achieve. She's very ambitious. And that's stressful for you? Sometimes. She sees potential that I don't always see, you know? She pushes me to think bigger, reach higher. Or controls you. I thought, but didn't say it. Marcus, if you ever need someone to talk to, someone who loves you regardless of your success or failure, you know I'm here, right? He nodded, and for a moment, he looked like the little boy I'd raised. I know, Mom. And I'm sorry if I seem dismissive at lunch. There's a lot of pressure right now. What kind of pressure? But before he could answer, we heard Sophia's voice in the hallway. Maria, whose car is in our driveway? Marcus's face immediately changed, becoming guarded and tense. That's Sophia. She came home early. The office door opened, and Sophia walked in wearing yoga clothes and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Hillary, what a lovely surprise. Is everything all right? I was worried about Marcus, I said, standing to give her a polite hug. He seemed stressed, and I couldn't reach him on his phone. Oh, he's just been working too hard, Sophia said, moving to stand behind Marcus's chair with her hands on his shoulders. The gesture looked possessive rather than affectionate. I keep telling him he needs to delegate more, don't I, darling? Marcus nodded, but I noticed he leaned away from her touch. Well, I'm glad he's okay, I said. I should let you both get back to your afternoon. Actually, Hillary, since you're here, there's something we should discuss. Sophia's voice was still sweet, but there was steel underneath it. Marcus mentioned that you had some questions about your allowance arrangement. The word allowance was emphasized just slightly, reminding me that I was supposed to be a dependent receiving charity, not a mother who'd sacrificed everything for her son's success. I was just trying to understand the details better, I said carefully. Of course. It can be confusing. Marcus has set up a very sophisticated financial structure to make sure you're taken care of while also maximizing tax efficiency. Isn't that right, Marcus? He nodded again, looking uncomfortable. The important thing is that you don't need to worry about any of it, Sophia continued. Marcus handles everything, and you're completely secure. I appreciate that, I said. It's just that I like to understand how things work. Well, you don't need to understand the technical details. That's what we're here for. The condescension was breathtaking. She was talking to me like I was a child or someone with diminished capacity. Of course, I said with a smile. I'm sure you both know what's best. I left the house with evidence of systematic theft and tax fraud, but more importantly, I now understood the dynamic between Marcus and Sophia. She was controlling him through a combination of ambition and intimidation, the same techniques she'd used on her previous victims. But Marcus wasn't just a victim, he was a willing participant in stealing from me. Whether that was because of Sophia's influence or his own greed didn't matter. The result was the same. That evening, I met with Patricia Blackwood to review the evidence I'd gathered. Mrs. Bell, this is explosive material. We have clear evidence of tax fraud, elder financial abuse, and potentially identity theft if they're claiming to have set up accounts in your name. What's our next step? We could file criminal complaints immediately, Patricia said, reviewing the photographs I'd taken. But I think we should consider a more strategic approach. If we move too quickly, they'll destroy evidence and claim this is all a misunderstanding. What do you suggest? Let's gather more evidence first. Document the pattern over several months. Maybe set up a situation where they have to explain the discrepancy on record. I had a better idea. What if we force them to confront the truth publicly? The same way they humiliated me. Patricia raised an eyebrow. What did you have in mind? Marcus's birthday is in March. Every year he throws a big party, invites all the same people who were at Christmas. What if I gave a toast that revealed the truth about their generosity? That's dramatic. And legally risky if you make accusations you can't prove. But I can prove them. I have the bank records, the photographs of his checkbook, witnesses to Sophia's history. What if I simply told the truth about my financial situation and let people draw their own conclusions? Patricia smiled grimly. That could be very effective. Public shame is often more powerful than legal consequences for people like this. But first, I had more work to do. The next part of Hillary's journey will show you exactly how a woman scorned becomes a woman empowered. But before we continue, I want to hear from you. Have you ever discovered that someone you trusted was lying about supporting you or helping you? How did it feel to realize you'd been used? Share your story in the comments. Your experience might help another woman recognize the signs of financial manipulation. And if you're finding strength in Hillary's story, make sure you're subscribed with notifications on, because what happens next will show you the power of patience, planning, and perfectly timed revenge. Trust me, you won't want to miss how this unfolds. Over the next month, I settled into a routine that felt like preparing for war. Every morning after my grocery store shift, I would spend 2 hours at the library, meticulously documenting Marcus and Sophia's financial activities and building my case. Every afternoon at the tailor shop, I would listen to Mrs. Patterson's customers gossip about Highland Park society, taking mental notes about the social connections that could be useful later. But my most important work happened in the evenings after my cleaning shift ended. I had discovered something powerful. The internet loved stories about entitled rich people getting their comeuppance. And I had a story that would make people's blood boil. I started a blog called The Invisible Woman on a free platform, using a pen name and making sure my identity was completely hidden. My first post was titled, "My Billionaire Son's Generous Allowance." Imagine working 3 jobs at age 59, struggling to pay rent on a 1-bedroom apartment, while your multimillionaire son tells his friends he gives you $7,000 a month. Imagine discovering that not only have you never seen a penny of that money, but it's actually going to his gold digger wife, while he claims tax deductions for supporting you. This is my story, and I'm finally ready to tell it. I kept the details vague enough to protect myself legally, but specific enough that anyone who knew Marcus would recognize the situation. I posted it at midnight on a Thursday and went to bed wondering if anyone would even read it. By Friday morning, the post had 47,000 views and 800 comments. By Saturday, it had been shared on Facebook 12,000 times and picked up by several revenge story accounts on Instagram and TikTok. By Sunday, it had been featured on a Reddit forum called Entitled Parents and had accumulated over 200,000 views. The comments were exactly what I'd hoped for. Outrage at Marcus and Sophia's behavior, sympathy for my situation, and demands for updates. People were calling it financial elder abuse, tax fraud, and emotional manipulation. Several commenters shared similar stories about family members who'd used them for financial benefit while providing no actual support. But more importantly, people were starting to guess who the story was about. "This sounds like it's about someone in Dallas," one commenter wrote. "The details about the tech consulting company and Highland Park mansion are pretty specific." "I bet I know who this is," wrote another. "There are only so many billionaire tech bros in Dallas with recent marriages to much younger women." I had planted a seed, and it was beginning to grow. Over the next 2 weeks, I posted 3 more entries. The wedding I paid for, but wasn't really invited to, about how the money from selling my house had funded Marcus's business expansion right before his lavish wedding to Sophia. 3 jobs at 59, a day in my invisible life. A detailed account of my work schedule and living conditions, contrasted with social media posts from Marcus and Sophia's luxury lifestyle. The paper trail, how to hide $84,000 in plain sight. A carefully worded explanation of how someone could claim tax deductions for supporting an elderly parent while actually giving the money to someone else. Each post gained more traction than the last. The blog now had 15,000 subscribers, and my stories were being shared across multiple platforms. Local Dallas social media accounts had started picking them up, and I'd seen several comments from people claiming they knew the family involved. But the real breakthrough came with my 5th post, The Other Victims, when financial abuse has a pattern. I couldn't name Sophia directly, but I could share the stories Richard Hoffman and David Chun had given me permission to tell. Stories about a woman who targeted lonely, wealthy older men with sob stories and financial emergencies, who moved quickly to gain control of their finances and social lives, who used shame and threats to maintain her power over them. This woman didn't just steal from her victims once, I wrote. She refined her techniques over years, learning exactly how to identify vulnerable targets and exploit their loneliness and generosity. And now she's applied those same techniques to manipulating my son and stealing money that should be supporting his elderly mother. That post exploded. Within 48 hours, it had 500,000 views and had been picked up by several true crime podcasts and YouTube channels. More importantly, it had prompted other victims to come forward. My anonymous blog email account was flooded with messages from people who thought they'd encountered the same woman. A retired teacher from Plano who'd lost $15,000 to a marketing consultant who matched Sophia's description. A widowed businessman from Fort Worth who'd had a strikingly similar experience with a woman who'd claimed her name was Sophie Torres. I now had evidence of at least 6 different victims over 8 years, with a total financial loss of over $200,000. This wasn't just a family dispute, it was a criminal enterprise. But I wasn't ready to reveal that information yet. First, I wanted to see how Marcus and Sophia would respond to the pressure. I didn't have to wait long. On a Tuesday evening in February, as I was finishing my cleaning shift, my phone rang. It was Marcus, and he sounded furious. "Mom, I need to talk to you. Right now." "Of course, sweetheart. Is everything all right?" "No, everything is not all right. There are stories all over the internet about our family. Stories that make me look like I'm stealing from you." I turned on my phone's recording app. "What stories?" "I don't understand." "Don't play dumb, Mom. There's a blog going viral about a son who lies about giving his mother an allowance. The details are very specific, too specific to be a coincidence." "Marcus, I don't know anything about any blog. I barely know how to use the internet beyond checking my bank account." "Well, someone does. Someone who knows intimate details about our family finances. And I want to know who." Maybe you should be asking yourself why people are so outraged by these stories. Maybe the problem isn't who's telling them. Maybe the problem is that they're true. There was a long silence. When Marcus spoke again, his voice was cold in a way I'd never heard before. "Mom, I don't know what game you think you're playing, but it needs to stop. These stories are damaging my business reputation and causing problems for Sophia." "What kind of problems?" "People are asking questions. Clients are wondering if I'm trustworthy. Sophia's been getting weird looks at her charity events." "Good," I thought. Let them squirm. "Marcus, if people are asking questions, maybe you should be prepared with honest answers." "The honest answer is that I've been more than generous with you, and you're being ungrateful. The honest answer is that you've been claiming to give me money I've never received while I work 60 hours a week to survive." "That's not." "Look, Mom, the financial arrangements are complicated. There are tax implications, legal structures, investment considerations. You wouldn't understand all the details. Try me. I'm not going to discuss confidential financial information over the phone. But I need you to understand that these blog posts are hurting innocent people. The only innocent people being hurt are the ones being lied to about your generosity. Mom, I'm warning you. If you're behind these stories, or if you're talking to reporters or bloggers, you need to stop. Now." The threat was clear, but so was the fear in his voice. The blog had hit its target. "Marcus, I love you. But I won't be threatened or intimidated anymore. If you're doing nothing wrong, then you have nothing to worry about." I hung up and immediately called Patricia Blackwood. "They're panicking," I told her. "Marcus just threatened me to stop the blog posts." "Did you record the conversation?" "Every word." "Perfect. That's evidence of intimidation, which supports the elder abuse claims. How do you want to proceed?" I thought about the thousands of comments supporting me, the messages from other victims, the growing awareness of Sophia's criminal history. I want to give them one more chance to tell the truth voluntarily. If they won't, then we go public with everything. What did you have in mind? Marcus's 35th birthday party is in 3 weeks. Same venue, same guest list as the Christmas party where this all started. I'm going to attend, and I'm going to give a toast that tells the real story of our family's financial arrangements. Hillary, that's incredibly risky. If you make specific accusations without ironclad proof, you could be sued for defamation. Then I won't make accusations. I'll just tell my story. I'll talk about working 3 jobs, about never receiving the allowance Marcus claims to give me, about being grateful for the tax benefits he gets from claiming me as a dependent while I struggle to pay rent. Patricia was quiet for a moment. That could be brilliant. You're not accusing them of anything illegal. You're just sharing your personal experience. If people draw conclusions about fraud or theft, that's their interpretation.
Exactly.
And if Marcus and Sophia want to claim I'm lying, they'll have to provide documentation showing where that $7,000 a month actually goes, which they can't do without admitting it goes to Sophia.
Right.
They've trapped themselves with their own lies. Over the next 3 weeks, I prepared for what I privately called the reckoning. I wrote and rewrote my speech, making sure every word was factual and defensible. I coordinated with Patricia to have legal documents ready to file immediately after the party. I reached out to the local victims of Sophia's previous scams and asked them to be available to speak to authorities if needed. Most importantly, I updated my blog with a post titled "The Birthday Toast That Will Change Everything." In 3 days, I'm attending my son's birthday party, the same venue where he first lied about giving me an allowance. This time, I won't smile and stay quiet while he performs generosity he's never actually shown. This time, I'm going to tell the truth about what it's really like to be the supported elderly mother of a billionaire. Stay tuned. This invisible woman is about to become very visible. That post received 800,000 views in 24 hours. The stage was set. The audience was watching. And Hillary Bell was ready to stop being invisible. The morning of Marcus's 35th birthday party, I woke up before my alarm for the first time in years. Not from anxiety or insomnia, but from anticipation. Today was the day I stopped being a victim and became something far more dangerous, a woman with nothing left to lose. I had taken the day off from all 3 jobs, the first personal day I'd requested in over 2 years. Mrs. Patterson had been concerned when I called in, asking if I was feeling well. I'm feeling better than I have in decades, I told her. But I need to handle some family business today. I spent the morning in careful preparation. I'd bought a new dress for the occasion. Not from TJ Maxx this time, but from a proper department store. Black, elegant, and appropriate for both a birthday celebration and what Patricia Blackwood had started calling the public execution of their reputation. At 2 p.m., I met Patricia at her office for a final review of our strategy. Are you ready for this, Hillary? I looked at the stack of legal documents on her desk, criminal complaints ready to be filed, civil suit papers prepared, evidence folders organized with military precision. I've been ready for 34 years, I said. I just didn't know it until now. Remember, stick to the facts. Don't make accusations you can't prove. Tell your story, let people draw their own conclusions. And if they try to stop me or discredit me, then they'll be doing it in front of a room full of witnesses, some of whom are already suspicious thanks to your blog posts. The party was being held at the same country club where Marcus had taken me for our disastrous lunch. I arrived at 6 p.m., just as cocktail hour was beginning. The room was decorated in Marcus's favorite colors, navy and gold, and filled with the same crowd of wealthy Dallas socialites, business leaders, and politicians who'd witnessed my humiliation at Christmas. But this time, I wasn't the invisible old woman grateful for an invitation. I was a woman on a mission. Marcus and Sophia were holding court near the bar, accepting birthday wishes and compliments on the party. Sophia wore a dress that probably cost more than I made in 3 months, her smile brilliant and artificial as always. I watched them for a few minutes, noting the subtle signs of stress I'd learned to recognize. Marcus's shoulders were tense, and he kept glancing around the room as if looking for threats. Sophia's smile never wavered, but her eyes were watchful, calculating. They knew something was coming. My blog posts had created enough buzz in their social circles that everyone was waiting to see what would happen next. Hillary, a woman named Margaret Walsh, approached me with a champagne glass and a sympathetic expression. I remembered her from the Christmas party. She'd been one of the people who'd commented on Marcus's generosity. How wonderful to see you again. You look lovely. Thank you, Margaret. It's nice to be here. You know, I've been thinking about you since Christmas. Marcus mentioned how much he enjoys taking care of you. It must be such a comfort to have a son who's so devoted. It's certainly been an education, I said carefully. Margaret leaned closer, lowering her voice. I hope you don't mind me asking, but have you seen those terrible blog posts going around? About a mother whose son lies about supporting her? It's just awful. I can't imagine how hurtful that must be for families dealing with similar situations. So the rumors were already circulating.
Perfect.
I have seen them, I said. Very interesting stories. So specific and detailed. It makes you wonder how someone could know so much about a family's private financial arrangements. Exactly. Unless. Margaret's eyes widened as the implication hit her. Oh my goodness. Hillary, you don't think. I think the truth has a way of coming to light, I said with a smile. Excuse me, I want to wish Marcus happy birthday. I made my way across the room, accepting greetings and small talk from people who were clearly watching for drama. Several mentioned the blog posts, either directly or indirectly, and I could see the speculation growing. Mom, Marcus spotted me and approached with what looked like relief. I'm so glad you came. You look beautiful. He hugged me, and I let him, noting how his hands shook slightly. Happy birthday, sweetheart. 35. I can hardly believe it. Neither can I. Listen, Mom, about our phone conversation the other day. I'm sorry if I sounded stressed. There's been a lot of weird stuff happening lately. People asking strange questions, making assumptions based on internet rumors. What kind of assumptions? Just nonsense. People with too much time on their hands, making up stories about families they don't even know. Sophia appeared at his elbow, her smile bright and predatory. Hillary, what a lovely surprise. I wasn't sure you'd be able to make it. I wouldn't miss Marcus's birthday for the world. After everything he's done for me, it's the least I can do. Something flickered in Sophia's eyes. Of course. Family is so important. Speaking of family, I said, I was hoping I might say a few words tonight. A birthday toast for my wonderful son. Marcus and Sophia exchanged glances. That's very sweet, Mom, but we've already planned the evening pretty tightly. Maybe just something quick during dinner? Oh, I think people would love to hear from Marcus's mother, I said loudly enough for nearby guests to overhear. Especially after all those lovely things you said about our family at Christmas. Margaret Walsh, who was standing close enough to hear, clapped her hands together. Oh, yes. Hillary, you simply must give a toast. We'd all love to hear about what it's like being Marcus's mother. Other guests overheard and began agreeing enthusiastically. A mother's toast. How sweet. We want to hear Hillary's speech. Marcus looked trapped. In front of his guests, he couldn't refuse his elderly mother the chance to give a birthday toast without looking callous. Of course, he said with a forced smile. I'd be honored. At 8 p.m., dinner was served, and I waited through the meal, letting anticipation build. I'd positioned myself at a table with Margaret Walsh and several other influential Highland Park wives, all of whom had heard rumors about the blog posts and were clearly expecting drama. After dessert, Marcus stood to give a brief thank you speech to his guests. When he finished, Margaret Walsh called out, "Now we want to hear from Hillary." The room quieted as I stood, my champagne glass in hand. Every eye was on me, including those of the two people who'd spent years making me invisible. "Thank you all so much," I began, my voice carrying clearly across the room. "It's wonderful to celebrate my son's birthday with all of you. Many of you have been so kind to me over the years, and I want you to know how much that's meant." Polite applause rippled through the crowd. You know, watching Marcus grow up has been the greatest joy of my life. From the time he was a little boy, he showed such ambition, such drive to succeed. And I was so proud to support that drive in any way I could. I paused, letting my eyes sweep the room. Everyone was listening intently. I worked extra shifts to pay for his college expenses. I took out mortgages on my house to fund his first business ventures. I sold that house and gave him the proceeds when he needed capital to expand. Every sacrifice felt worth it because I believed in his dreams. The room was completely silent now. Even the waitstaff had stopped moving. And Marcus has achieved everything I hoped for him and more. He's built a multi-million-dollar business, owns beautiful properties, loves a life of success and comfort. I couldn't be prouder. Marcus was smiling, but I could see the confusion in his eyes. This wasn't the speech he'd been dreading. "What's been harder for me to understand," I continued, my voice remaining warm and conversational, "is why Marcus has been telling people that he gives me $7,000 a month when I've never received a penny of that money." The silence in the room became absolute. I could hear someone's sharp intake of breath. I work 60 hours a week across 3 jobs, stocking shelves at a grocery store at dawn, doing alterations at a tailor shop in the afternoons, and cleaning offices until 11 at night. I live in a 1-bedroom apartment and drive a 15-year-old Honda. I turned to look directly at Marcus, whose face had gone pale. "So, when you announced to everyone at Christmas that you were giving me a $7,000 monthly allowance, I was confused. When I asked you about it privately, you suggested I might be having memory problems due to my age." Gasps and murmurs were starting to ripple through the crowd. I've spent the past 2 months trying to understand where that $84,000 a year goes, if it's not coming to me. I've discovered that checks for $7,000 are written monthly to someone named S. Torres. I've learned that Marcus claims me as a dependent on his taxes, getting substantial deductions for the support he claims to provide. Sophia had gone completely white. Marcus was staring at me like he'd seen a ghost. "I want to be clear," I said, my voice still calm and measured. "I'm not accusing anyone of wrongdoing. I'm simply sharing my experience as the supposedly supported elderly mother of a successful businessman. An experience that includes working 3 jobs at age 59 while my billionaire son tells his friends he's taking care of me financially." The room erupted. Voices raised in shock and outrage. Someone said, "That's terrible." Another voice called out, "How could they do that to their own mother?" Marcus stood up abruptly. "Mom, you're clearly upset. Maybe we should discuss this privately." "I'm not upset, Marcus. I'm just tired of being invisible while you use me as a prop in your performance of generosity." "You're making serious accusations," Sophia interjected, her voice sharp. "Accusations that could be considered defamatory." "I haven't accused anyone of anything," I replied calmly. "I've simply shared my personal experience. If anyone wants to claim I'm lying, I'd welcome the opportunity to compare bank records." That was the moment Marcus realized he was trapped. If he claimed I was lying, he'd have to prove he actually gave me the money. If he admitted the money went elsewhere, he'd be confessing to tax fraud and elder abuse. "This is inappropriate," Sophia said, standing as well. "Hillary, you're clearly having some kind of breakdown. This isn't the time or place." "When would be the appropriate time and place?" I interrupted. "When you've stolen another $84,000. when you found your next elderly victim to manipulate. The accusation hung in the air like a bomb. Several guests were already pulling out their phones, either to record the confrontation or to start spreading the news on social media. Margaret Walsh stood up at my table. "Marcus, is this true? Do you not actually support your mother financially?" Other voices joined in. "How could you lie about something like that? Your poor mother, working 3 jobs. This is disgusting." Marcus looked around the room at faces that had gone from admiring to contemptuous in a matter of minutes. His carefully cultivated image was crumbling in real time. "There are complications," he said weakly. "Financial structures that civilians wouldn't understand." "Try us," called out Richard Hoffman, a man I recognized as one of Marcus's major clients. "Explain how giving money to S. Torres counts as supporting your mother." The fact that someone had connected S. Torres to Sofia so quickly told me the rumors had been spreading even more widely than I'd realized. Sofia grabbed Marcus's arm. "We're leaving. This is slander, and we won't stand here and listen to it." "No one's stopping you from leaving," I said pleasantly. "But the truth doesn't disappear just because you're not here to hear it." They pushed through the crowd toward the exit, followed by a chorus of angry voices and disgusted comments. But not everyone left. About half the guests stayed, surrounding me with questions and expressions of support. "Hillary, this is appalling," Margaret Walsh said. "How long has this been going on?" 2 years that I can prove, possibly longer." "Have you contacted the authorities?" "I have an appointment with the district attorney's office tomorrow morning." "Good. This is elder abuse. Plain and simple." Over the next hour, I found myself at the center of an impromptu support group. Guest after guest approached to express outrage at Marcus and Sofia's behavior and to share their own experiences with financial manipulation within families. But more importantly, I learned that several people had suspected something was wrong for months. Marcus's aggressive business tactics, Sofia's expensive lifestyle that seemed to exceed even Marcus's considerable income, rumors about her past relationships with older, wealthy men. "I knew something was off about that woman," said Janet Morrison, whose husband owned a major construction company. "She's been trying to get Richard to invest in some new business venture of hers. Now I'm wondering if it's legitimate." By the time I left the country club at 10 p.m., I knew the story would be all over Dallas social media before midnight. The invisible woman had become visible with a vengeance. My phone was already ringing as I drove home. Patricia Blackwood's number showed on the screen. "Hillary, my phone has been ringing nonstop. People are calling to ask if I represent you, reporters want statements, and someone from the DA's office wants to meet with us first thing Monday morning. Are you ready for this to get bigger? The question is, are you ready? Because once we file these complaints, there's no going back. This will be a public legal battle with a lot of media attention." I thought about Marcus's face when he realized his lies had been exposed. About Sofia's threats and manipulations. About 34 years of working multiple jobs while my son built an empire and forgot where he came from. "Patricia, I've been invisible for decades. I'm ready to be seen." "Then let's make sure they see everything." The story exploded overnight. By 6 a.m. Monday morning, my blog post about the birthday toast had been viewed over 2 million times. The Dallas Morning News had reached out for comment. 3 local TV stations wanted interviews. Social media was ablaze with hashtags like #AllowanceGate and #InvisibleMothers. But more importantly, the district attorney's office had moved our meeting up to 8 a.m. I arrived at Patricia Blackwood's office at 7:30, carrying a briefcase full of evidence that had grown substantially over the weekend. Not just the financial documents and recorded conversations, but screenshots of hundreds of supportive messages from blog readers, including 24 from other potential victims of Sofia's scams. "Hillary, I need to prepare you for what's about to happen," Patricia said as we reviewed our materials. "This isn't just going to be a family dispute anymore. With the media attention and the evidence we have, This is going to become a major criminal investigation. I understand. Marcus and Sophia are going to fight back hard. They'll try to discredit you, claim you're confused or vindictive. They'll probably hire the best lawyers money can buy. Let them. I have the truth. The truth isn't always enough in court. Are you prepared for this to get ugly? For them to attack your character, your mental competency, your motives? I thought about the woman I'd been 6 months ago. Grateful for scraps of attention, accepting lies as love, working myself to exhaustion while my son profited from my suffering. Patricia, they've already done their worst to me. They made me invisible while stealing from me. They gaslit me when I asked questions. They threatened me when I started seeking answers. What could they do now that would be worse than what they've already done? She smiled grimly. Then let's go destroy them legally. The Dallas County District Attorney's office was located in a gleaming government building downtown. Assistant DA Jennifer Martinez met us in a conference room with a view of the city skyline, a city where Marcus had built his reputation on lies about his generosity to his mother. Mrs. Bell, Jennifer said, settling behind a stack of files, your case has generated a lot of attention over the weekend. Both media attention and attention from other potential victims who've come forward. Other victims? We've received calls from 6 different people claiming to have been financially manipulated by Sophia Torres Bell using similar methods to what you've described. We've also had 2 tips about potential tax fraud involving your son's business. Patricia leaned forward. Are you saying this investigation is going to extend beyond Hillary's case? I'm saying we're looking at a pattern of criminal behavior that may involve multiple felonies across several years. Elder financial abuse, tax fraud, identity theft, and potentially organized fraud conspiracy. My heart was pounding. I'd wanted justice, but I hadn't expected the scope to be this broad. Jennifer continued, Mrs. Bell, I need you to understand that if we proceed with this investigation, you'll be at the center of a very public criminal case. Your family situation will be examined under a microscope. Every detail of your relationship with your son and his wife will become public record. What are the potential charges? Against your son, tax fraud and elder financial abuse, each carrying possible prison time of 2 to 10 years. Against his wife, those same charges plus potential additional counts related to her previous victims. If we can prove conspiracy, the sentences could be enhanced significantly.
Prison time.
I hadn't fully processed that Marcus could actually go to jail. Mrs. Bell, Jennifer said gently, I can see this is overwhelming. You don't have to decide right now. You could pursue civil remedies instead. Sue for the money they've stolen, get restitution, avoid the criminal courts entirely. I thought about Marcus as a little boy, bringing me drawings from school and telling me about his dreams of being successful. I thought about the pride I'd felt watching him graduate from Stanford, start his business, build his life. Then I thought about his cold voice on the phone, threatening me to stay quiet. I thought about Sophia's calculated cruelty, her history of targeting vulnerable people. I thought about the other victims who'd suffered in silence. How many other people are we talking about? I asked. Jennifer consulted her notes. So far, we have 6 potential victims of Mrs. Bell's previous scams, totaling approximately $300,000 in losses. We also have 2 business partners of your son's who've come forward with concerns about financial irregularities in his company. So, this isn't just about me anymore.
No, ma'am.
This appears to be a criminal enterprise that's been operating for years, with you as just the most recent victim. I looked at Patricia, who nodded encouragingly. What do you need from me? Jennifer smiled. Everything. Full cooperation, complete transparency, and the willingness to testify if this goes to trial. You have it. The investigation moved quickly once it officially began. Within a week, search warrants had been executed on Marcus's home and business offices. The financial records seized confirmed everything I'd suspected and revealed even more. The $7,000 monthly payments to S. Torres had been going on for over 3 years, not just the 2 years I'd been able to document. That meant Marcus had stolen over $250,000 from me while claiming tax benefits for supporting me. But Sophia's schemes went much deeper. The investigators found evidence of at least 12 different victims over the past decade, with total losses approaching $600,000. She had refined identity theft to an art form, using different variations of her name and background story to target lonely, wealthy older men. Most damaging of all, they found communications between Marcus and Sophia discussing the tax benefits of claiming me as a dependent while using the money for their own expenses. Text messages that made their intent clear. Sophia to Marcus. The IRS will never audit the dependent care deduction if we keep it under $100,000 annually. Marcus to Sophia. My accountant says the Hillary payments are perfect cover for your real estate investments. Sophia to Marcus. Your mom is actually useful for something finally. That last message broke something in me that I hadn't realized was still intact. The media coverage was relentless but supportive. My story had tapped into something universal, the frustration of being undervalued and exploited by family members who were supposed to protect you. The invisible woman had become a symbol of resistance against financial elder abuse. I did interviews with 3 local TV stations and a national cable news program. Each time, I told the same story in the same calm, factual tone I'd used at the birthday party. I didn't need to embellish or exaggerate. The truth was damning enough. This isn't about revenge, I told the CNN interviewer. This is about making sure other people don't go through what I went through. Financial elder abuse is real, it's devastating, and it often comes from the people we trust most. The interview aired on a Tuesday evening. By Wednesday morning, I'd received over 3,000 emails from people sharing their own stories of family financial manipulation. But the most important message came from Maria Santos. Mrs. Bell, she said when I answered my phone, I want to help more. I want to testify about what I saw in that house. About how Mrs. Sophia treated everyone, including Mr. Marcus. He was different before he married her. She changed him. Maria, are you sure? This could affect your job prospects. Mrs. Bell, some things are more important than jobs. What they did to you is wrong. What she did to those other men was wrong. I have a daughter. I want her to grow up in a world where people can't steal from grandmothers and get away with it. Maria's testimony was devastating. She described years of witnessing Sophia's manipulation and control, Marcus's gradual transformation from a caring son to someone who saw his mother as a financial inconvenience, and the casual cruelty with which they discussed my working multiple jobs while claiming to support me. But the case took an unexpected turn when Marcus's business partners came forward with even more serious allegations. It turned out that Marcus hadn't just been defrauding the government and stealing from me. He'd been embezzling from his own company to fund Sophia's lifestyle and investment schemes. The downtown condo, the boutique, the restaurant investments, all had been purchased with money Marcus had siphoned from Bell's strategic consulting. His business partners, who own minority stakes in the company, had become suspicious when the financial reports showed declining profits despite increased revenue. When they demanded a forensic audit after my story went public, they discovered that Marcus had been transferring company funds to personal accounts and then to various investments controlled by Sophia. The total amount stolen from his own business was over $2 million. Mrs. Bell, Jennifer Martinez told me during one of our regular updates, your son and his wife are looking at federal charges now, not just state. Wire fraud, tax evasion, money laundering, elder abuse, and organized criminal conspiracy. If convicted on all counts, they could face 20 to 30 years in prison. I felt numb. When I'd started this journey, I just wanted answers about a $7,000 monthly allowance. Now I'd uncovered a criminal enterprise that had destroyed multiple lives and stolen millions of dollars. How are you feeling about all this? Patricia asked me after we left the DA's office. Honestly, empty. I thought I'd feel satisfied or vindicated or something, but mostly I just feel sad. That's normal. You're grieving the son you thought you had. She was right. The Marcus I'd raised, the boy who'd hugged me at his graduation and promised to take care of me someday, that person had either never existed or had been completely corrupted by greed and Sophia's influence. The Marcus who was now facing decades in prison was a stranger who happened to share my DNA. 2 weeks later, the indictments were unsealed. Marcus Bell and Sophia Torres Bell were charged with 14 felonies between them, including elder financial abuse, tax fraud, wire fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy to commit organized fraud. The news coverage was national now. My story had become a symbol of something larger, the vulnerability of elderly people to financial abuse, even from their own families. I appeared on Good Morning America, 60 Minutes, and The Today Show. Each time I told the same story. A mother who'd sacrificed everything for her son, only to discover he was stealing from her while claiming to support her. But the most powerful moment came during a town hall on elder abuse hosted by AARP. Mrs. Bell, an elderly woman in the audience, said, "How did you find the strength to fight back? I'm dealing with something similar with my daughter, but I'm afraid if I speak up, I'll lose my family entirely." I looked at this woman, probably in her 70s, wearing clothes that had seen better days, clutching a tissue in her shaking hands, and I saw myself 6 months earlier. "Ma'am, what's your name?" "Dorothy." "Dorothy, I need you to understand something. If your family is stealing from you, you've already lost them. They've chosen money over love, convenience over character. Fighting back isn't about destroying family relationships. It's about refusing to let people destroy you while hiding behind the word family." The audience erupted in applause, but Dorothy was crying. "I'm 78 years old," she said through her tears. "I don't have the energy to fight like you did." You don't need energy, Dorothy. You just need to stop being invisible. Tell one person the truth. Let them help you tell another person. Let the truth spread until it becomes impossible to ignore. After the town hall, dozens of people approached me with their own stories. Adult children who'd stolen from parents. Spouses who'd hidden assets and claimed financial support they never provided. Family members who'd used elderly relatives for tax benefits while providing no actual care. I realized that my story wasn't unique. It was universal. And that gave me an idea. Before we continue with Hillary's final triumph, I want you to pause and think about Dorothy from that town hall. Think about all the other Dorothys out there, suffering in silence while family members exploit their love and loyalty. If this story is resonating with you, if you see yourself or someone you love in Hillary's journey, then you need to subscribe and hit that notification bell. Because what happens next isn't just revenge, it's transformation. And Hillary's final move will show you exactly how a woman who is made invisible can become impossible to ignore. Drop a comment if you've ever had to choose between family loyalty and your own well-being. Your story matters, and this community is here to support you. Now, let's see how Hillary Bell's greatest victory isn't about destroying her enemies, but about empowering others to refuse to be victims. 1 year and 3 days after Marcus had humiliated me at his Christmas party, I stood in my new living room, looking out at a view I never could have imagined having. The condo I'd purchased overlooked downtown Dallas, the same skyline Marcus had once promised I'd never have to worry about affording to see up close. The civil suit had been settled out of court for $3.2 million, the amount Marcus and Sophia had stolen from me, his business partners, and the other victims, plus punitive damages. The criminal case was still pending, with both of them facing trial in March, but the financial recovery had been swift and complete. I'd used part of the settlement to buy this place and quit all three of my jobs. But more importantly, I'd used the rest to fund something that would have been impossible to imagine a year ago, the Hillary Bell Foundation for Elder Financial Justice. My phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. It was Patricia Blackwood, now my lawyer, business partner, and closest friend. Hillary, are you ready for tonight? Tonight was my Christmas party. Not a birthday celebration or family gathering, but a deliberate response to the humiliation I'd suffered in that same country club 12 months earlier. I'd rented the largest ballroom in the same venue where Marcus had lied about supporting me. I'd invited everyone who'd been present that night, plus the media, the other victims of Sophia's scams, and the hundreds of people who'd reached out to share their own stories of family financial abuse. The theme was Visible Women, celebrating survivors of elder financial abuse and the allies who'd helped them find their voices. I'm ready, I told Patricia. Are the other speakers prepared? Dorothy from the AARP Town Hall is nervous, but determined. Richard Hoffman is looking forward to finally telling his story publicly. And Maria Santos is excited to be recognized for her courage in testifying. What about the surprise guest? Patricia laughed. He's ready. And Hillary, I think you're going to enjoy this more than any revenge fantasy you could have imagined. At 6 p.m., I arrived at the country club wearing a red dress that cost more than I used to make in 3 months. But unlike the expensive clothes Marcus and Sophia had flaunted, this dress felt like armor I'd earned rather than stolen. The ballroom was packed. Local news crews, domestic violence advocates, elder law attorneys, and at least 200 people who'd been inspired by my story to speak up about their own experiences with family financial abuse. But most gratifyingly, many of the people who'd attended Marcus's Christmas party the year before were there too. Margaret Walsh, Richard Hoffman, Janet Morrison, the Highland Park elite who'd witnessed my humiliation and were now here to witness my triumph. Hillary. Margaret rushed over as I entered. This is incredible. The whole city is talking about what you've accomplished. Thank you, Margaret. I'm glad you could be here. Are you kidding? I wouldn't miss this. After what we saw happen to you, and then learning about all those other victims, you've opened everyone's eyes to something we should have been paying attention to all along. The evening began with a reception where survivors of elder financial abuse shared their stories with journalists and advocates. Dorothy, the woman from the AARP Town Hall, had become a fierce advocate for elder rights after confronting her daughter about stolen Social Security benefits. Hillary gave me the courage to stop being invisible, she told a reporter from the Dallas Morning News. I got my money back, and more importantly, I got my dignity back. Richard Hoffman was being interviewed by a crew from 60 Minutes about Sophia's pattern of targeting vulnerable older men. She was a predator, he said matter-of-factly. Professional, sophisticated, and completely without conscience. If Hillary hadn't exposed her, she'd still be out there destroying lives. At 8 p.m., I took the stage to address the crowd. The ballroom fell silent, just as it had a year ago when I'd given my impromptu toast at Marcus's birthday party. Exactly 1 year and 3 days ago, I began. I stood in this same room and discovered that my son had been lying about giving me financial support while I worked 3 jobs to survive. That night, I felt invisible, humiliated, and powerless. I paused, letting my eyes sweep the room. Many of the faces were the same as that night, but the energy was completely different. Tonight, I stand here as the founder of an organization that has helped recover over $8 million in stolen funds for elderly victims of family financial abuse. I stand here as someone who refused to stay invisible, who refused to accept lies as love, who refused to let shame silence the truth. The applause was thunderous, but I wasn't finished. But this isn't about my victory. This is about all of us choosing to see and support each other. This is about refusing to let anyone, family or stranger, exploit our love and loyalty for their financial gain. I gestured toward the crowd of survivors who joined us. These are the real heroes. Dorothy Martinez, who confronted her daughter and recovered $40,000 in stolen Social Security benefits. James Chun, who exposed his son's credit card fraud and got his retirement savings back. Maria Santos, who risked her job to testify about what she witnessed and helped protect other potential victims. More applause, and I could see people wiping away tears. But tonight, I also want to address the people who are probably watching this on social media rather than being here in person. A hush fell over the room. Everyone knew I was talking about Marcus and Sophia. To anyone who thinks they can use elderly family members as ATM machines while claiming to be generous caretakers, we see you now. We have networks, resources, and the willingness to expose your lies. The days of silent victims are over. The crowd erupted again, but I held up a hand for silence. And now, I'd like to introduce someone special. A year ago, I mentioned that Marcus's business was being audited due to irregularities uncovered during our investigation. Tonight, I'm pleased to introduce IRS Criminal Investigations Special Agent David Torres, no relation to Sophia, despite the name, who led the tax fraud investigation. A tall man in a sharp suit took the stage as the crowd murmured with curiosity. "Thank you, Mrs. Bell," Agent Torres said. "I'm here tonight to announce that the IRS investigation into Marcus Bell and Sophia Torres Bell has resulted in additional federal charges for tax evasion totaling $2.3 million over 5 years." Gasps echoed through the ballroom. More importantly, this investigation has led to a new IRS initiative to identify and prosecute cases where taxpayers claim dependent care deductions for support they don't actually provide. Mrs. Bell's courage in coming forward has helped us protect other potential victims and recover millions in unpaid taxes. The applause was deafening, but Agent Torres wasn't finished. I'm also authorized to announce that the Department of Justice is launching a nationwide task force on elder financial abuse, with Mrs. Bell serving as a civilian advisor. The Hillary Bell Foundation will receive federal funding to expand its victim assistance programs. I felt tears streaming down my face, but they were tears of triumph, not sadness. When the formal program ended, the real celebration began. Survivors, advocates, journalists, and allies mingled throughout the ballroom, sharing stories and building the networks that would make future abuse harder to hide. But the most meaningful moment came when Margaret Walsh approached me near the end of the evening. "Hillary, I owe you an apology." "For what?" "For not seeing what was happening right in front of me. When Marcus talked about supporting you, I should have asked more questions. I should have noticed that you were working multiple jobs. I should have wondered why a billionaire's mother was wearing altered department store dresses to society events." "Margaret, you couldn't have known." "Yes, I could have. We all could have. But it was easier to believe the pretty story than to look at the uncomfortable reality. That's on us, not you." She was right, and her acknowledgement meant more than any apology Marcus could have offered. As the evening wound down, I found myself standing alone on the terrace where Sophia had threatened me a year earlier. The December air was crisp, and the lights of Dallas sparkled below, a city that now knew my name and my story. Patricia joined me, handing me a glass of champagne. "Any regrets?" she asked. I thought about Marcus, facing 25 years in federal prison. About Sophia, whose criminal empire had been dismantled piece by piece. About the life I'd built from the wreckage of their betrayal. "None," I said. "They chose greed over love, lies over truth. They made their choices, and now they live with the consequences." "What's next for you?" I smiled, thinking about the foundation, the federal task force, the thousands of people who'd reached out with their own stories. I spent 34 years being invisible while other people used me for their benefit. I think I'll spend the rest of my life making sure that's harder for them to do to anyone else. My phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. For a moment, my heart clenched, wondering if it was Marcus trying to make contact despite his lawyer's advice. But when I opened it, the message was from a woman named Carol in Phoenix. Mrs. Bell, I watched your Christmas party speech online. My grandson has been stealing my disability checks for 2 years. After seeing your story, I called the police today. Thank you for showing me I don't have to be invisible anymore. I showed the message to Patricia, who smiled and raised her glass. To Carol in Phoenix, she said, and to all the invisible women who are about to become very visible indeed. We clinked glasses as snow began to fall over Dallas, each flake catching the light like a small, perfect moment of transformation. 6 months later, I sat in a green room at the CNN studios in New York, waiting to appear on Anderson Cooper 360. The trial had ended 3 weeks earlier with guilty verdicts on all counts. Marcus sentenced to 18 years in federal prison, Sophia to 25 years due to her extensive criminal history and leadership role in the conspiracy. But I wasn't here to talk about their convictions. I was here to discuss the Hillary Bell Foundation's latest victory, a congressional hearing that had resulted in the Elder Financial Protection Act, the most comprehensive federal legislation against family financial abuse in American history. Mrs. Bell, a young production assistant peered around the door. We're ready for you in 5 minutes. Are you nervous? Not anymore, I said honestly. I've learned that the truth doesn't require courage. It just requires refusing to stay silent. As I walked onto the set, I thought about the journey that had brought me here. 2 years earlier, I'd been stocking grocery store shelves at dawn while my son lied about supporting me. Tonight, I was about to discuss federal legislation that bore my name with one of the most respected journalists in America. Hillary Bell, Anderson Cooper said as the cameras rolled. 2 years ago, you were working 3 jobs while your billionaire son claimed he was giving you $7,000 a month that you never received. Tonight, you're here to discuss legislation that could protect millions of elderly Americans from similar abuse. How does that transformation feel? Anderson, I think the real transformation isn't mine, it's society's. 2 years ago, elder financial abuse was something people whispered about in shame. Today, it's something we investigate, prosecute, and prevent. That change came from ordinary people deciding to stop being invisible. Your foundation has helped recover over $50 million for victims of family financial abuse. But critics say you're encouraging elderly people to sue their own children. How do you respond to that? I'd say that anyone who's stealing from their elderly parents has already destroyed the family relationship. We're just helping victims stop pretending otherwise. The interview continued for 12 minutes, covering the foundation's work, the federal legislation, and the cultural shift around elder abuse awareness. But the moment that would be replayed on social media and quoted in news articles came at the end. Mrs. Bell, Anderson said, what would you say to someone watching this who suspects they're being financially abused by family members but is afraid to speak up? I looked directly into the camera, thinking about Carol in Phoenix, Dorothy from the town hall, and the thousands of people who'd written to share their stories. I'd say this: your love is not supposed to bankrupt you. Your loyalty is not supposed to impoverish you. And your family relationships should not require you to accept lies, theft, and manipulation in the name of keeping peace. You deserve better than being invisible. And if you're brave enough to speak up, there are people ready to help you be seen. After the interview, I took a taxi back to my hotel, watching the lights of Manhattan blur past the windows. My phone was already buzzing with messages, interview requests, speaking invitations, and thank you notes from survivors who'd found the courage to act after hearing similar words. But the message that mattered most was from Maria Santos, who is now the Foundation's Director of Victim Services. Mrs. Bell, we just got word that 3 more states are introducing legislation based on the federal model. The movement is growing faster than we ever imagined. The movement. That's what it had become. Not just my story, but a national reckoning with the reality of family financial abuse and elder exploitation. I called Patricia from my hotel room, looking out at the city's skyline and marveling at how different this view felt from the one I'd had from my little apartment in Dallas. "How did the interview go?" she asked. "Good, I think. Anderson was thorough, but fair." "Any word from the publishers about the book deal?" "They want to expand it beyond my story to include other survivors. A collection of voices rather than just a memoir." "That's brilliant. Your story opened the door, but hearing from multiple survivors will show how widespread this problem really is." The book, tentatively titled Invisible No More: How I Stopped My Son from Stealing My Life, would be published next year with proceeds going to expand the Foundation's work. But tonight, I was thinking less about future projects and more about the present moment. Tomorrow, I would fly back to Dallas, where I now lived in a penthouse that overlooked the city where I'd once cleaned office buildings at night. Next week, I would testify before a Senate subcommittee about strengthening federal elder abuse protections. Next month, I would speak at the AARP National Convention to an audience of 10,000 people. And every day, I would wake up knowing that I was no longer invisible, not to society, not to the media, not to the thousands of people who'd found their own voices by hearing mine. But more importantly, I was no longer invisible to myself. The woman who had accepted lies as love, who had worked herself to exhaustion while her son stole from her, who had smiled politely while being used as a prop in someone else's performance of generosity, that woman was gone. In her place was someone who understood that being seen required more than just speaking up. It required refusing to disappear again, no matter how much easier silence might seem. My phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize, but I'd learned to answer these calls. They were usually from people who'd seen my story and needed help finding their own voices. "Hello, this is Hillary Bell." "Mrs. Bell." The voice was shaky, elderly, frightened. "My name is Ruth, and I'm calling from Ohio. I saw your interview tonight, and I think my daughter-in-law is doing to me what your son did to you. Tell me what's happening, Ruth." For the next hour, I sat in that Manhattan hotel room, listening to another woman discover that she didn't have to be invisible anymore. Ruth's story was different from mine. A daughter-in-law who was stealing her Social Security checks while claiming to provide care, but the pattern was heartbreakingly familiar. By the time we finished talking, Ruth had agreed to contact the Ohio Attorney General's office and local elder abuse services. She had the phone numbers, the questions to ask, and most importantly, the understanding that she deserved better than what she was accepting. After I hung up, I looked at myself in the hotel room mirror. At 59 going on 61, I looked older than I had 2 years ago, but also somehow more solid, more present, more real. The invisible woman was gone forever, replaced by someone whose name had become synonymous with refusing to accept family abuse disguised as love. Tomorrow, there would be more Ruths to help, more interviews to give, more legislation to support, more survivors to celebrate. But tonight, I poured myself a glass of wine from the hotel minibar and raised it in a toast to the woman I used to be, the one who had accepted so little because she thought she deserved nothing more. "Thank you for surviving long enough for me to find you," I said to my reflection. "And thank you for finally deciding you were tired of being invisible." Outside, New York City sparkled with the lights of millions of people living their own stories of triumph and tragedy, visibility and invisibility, justice and injustice. But inside room 2847 of a Manhattan hotel, Hillary Bell smiled and began planning tomorrow's work in a world where she would never be invisible again. And in homes across the country, other invisible women watched the replay of my CNN interview and began to wonder if they, too, might be ready to be seen. The story wasn't over. In many ways, it was just beginning. But this chapter, the one where a woman reclaimed her life from the people who'd stolen it. This chapter was complete, and I had written every word of it myself. My name is Hillary Bell. I am 64 years old. I am visible. I am heard, and I am never going back to being invisible again. Neither should you. Thank you for joining Hillary on this incredible journey from invisible victim to visible victor. Her story shows us that it's never too late to reclaim your power, refuse to accept lies as love, and demand the respect you deserve. If Hillary's story touched your heart, moved your soul, or gave you the courage to examine your own relationships, then please subscribe to her true stories and hit that notification bell. Share this story with someone who might need to hear it, because somewhere out there is another Hillary working multiple jobs while family members claim to support her, and your sharing might be what gives her the courage to speak up. Drop a comment sharing your thoughts on Hillary's journey, or tell us about a time when you had to choose between keeping peace and demanding justice. Your voice matters in this community of strong women supporting each other. Until next time, remember, you are never meant to be invisible, and anyone who tries to make you disappear doesn't deserve a place in your story.